high-up bike in a kind of white sharkskin suit. And contemporaries of Peter Fraser, guys like John Rickford, who in fact brought out a book called Festival of Guyanese Words, they will speak about this teacher at Queen's College, Yango. So even though I haven't had the privilege of meeting him personally, I think this book is definitely a way of touching Yango's spirit. And I was asked to respond, you know, instinctively to this book. And as he said in the introduction, this book is like a cook-up. It's like a cook-up rice. You know, it's a book you can kind of dip into here and there at random and get a wealth of Guyanese heritage. So I want to respond in a similar way and make a few random remarks about this book. But in fact, C A Yansen joins that league and heritage of Caribbean people who are in love with the language. I'm talking about people like Frank Collymore from Barbados, J.D. Elder from Trinidad, A.J.C. Moore from Guyana, Louise Bennett from Jamaica, people who might not be linguists academically, but simply in love with the language, and at times take notes and keep these words for posterity. So this book is like a scrapbook, a kind of a showcase, a kind of a window of glimpses of our culture. And how I respond to this book, let's begin with childhood, because we start with that. And Yango takes us back into certain little words, like a baller. When you're flying kite in the seawall, you got your baller, and you're balling up the kite, and you're playing jumin, right? And I used to say, you get the bump on the lemonade stump. Right? I noticed Yango get this soda bump on the lemonade stump. But we used to say simply get the bump on the lemonade stump. And then you're talking about clammy cherry, you know, clammy cherry. When you're making your kite at Easter and you're pasting up your kite with your Barbados kite paper. I noticed Eileen Rogers got Barbados family. Right? And you're talking about things like a cat boil. I give you a pen, you take it back and I take it back from you, you will get a cat boil, right? Catch a coop. Now these whole expressions reflect our childhood, right? Bat and ball, and these different things. And a little word I can't avoid, that thing took me back years, a little word like kung si. You see, when your mother tell you, make sure you kung si. And I know that his daughter and his wife will forgive me because he didn't mention a certain thing. But the nice thing about this book is that it begins to release your subconscious and open out the gates of memory. And the moment I heard about kung si, my wicked imagination took me back to don't forget your soti, right? And don't forget Lolo, and don't forget powder cake. I mean, this is part of our culture. I was so amused one day, standing there in England and watching an English choreographer discussing folk dancing of all types, and said to a group of dancers, let's have the patty cake, thank you. And I found it so amusing. Now, so childhood, with all its naughtiness, with all its mischief, it's there. Then you look upon food. We have a wonderful Guyanese word, peculiar to Guyanese people, hongish. A rich word. You're really hongish, or hongishness. And then I was discussing with Joan Green's twin brother. He was saying the best part of the cook-up rice is the bun. At the bottom of the pot, the bun. And you're too scravenous. I mean, the language is rich, and licorice. And what's interesting about a word like licorice, it goes back to the archaic English, lustful, but it also has that meaning of gluttonous. You're too licorice. And when people speak about Creole and not realizing the power of the West African influence, West African syntax upon the English vocabulary, as if we're talking bad English. And if I were to put down on paper something like left the bun for Bombay, but first wipe the boo-boo from your eye. You know, you put that on a piece of paper, let an Englishman look at that, you know, left the bun for Bombay, but first wipe the boo-boo from your eye. And then you realize this is a very rich language. An interesting thing Yango said in the introduction, many expressions which we felt were CREOLESE were in fact legitimate English. I find that fascinating because a word we all used as children growing up in Guyana was the word cog. Stop cogging from me. You're a big cogger. And when I went to Ireland and I bought a book called How the Irish Speak English, I was simply amazed that they used the word to cog, because cog is a legitimate word, an ancient unknown game, and to cog was to cheat. You're cogging from me. And of course a word like skulk, you mustn't skulk from school. And this goes via the Scandinavian, and you've got the Norwegian word skulka, to lurk. And check out your English dictionary. To skulk means to shirk responsibility. And plenty teachers, even Guyanese teachers, in a child's essay might question the word skulk. Is this child using a Guyanese word and talking in inverted commas bad English, when skulk is in fact genuine, authentic Old English? Then you've got a word like done. You know, I used to think this is very Creolese, very Guyanese. Somebody say, oh man, you done him for a few cents. And the word to done, you know, it's the Old English, to press for payment. So what is rich about the Guyanese culture is that our language, our Creole, has valid connections to Old English, to Middle Irish, to Scandinavian origins, and Elizabethan English like Shakespearean, and a lot of things which the English so-called standard has lost, but which the Irish have retained. It still exists in our Guyanese speech. Let's move from those connections with Middle English and with English and so on. We pass through childhood, we pass through food. Let us look at something, what happens when we come to the Caribbean, from the Caribbean rather, to England. And you can see how words used in exactly the same way, but in a different context, has different meanings. Nowadays, Guyanese, if you go into Tesco and Safeway and you point to aubergine and you say you want a boulanger, you're in trouble. You point to chickpeas and you say you want chana, you're in trouble. You point to ladies' fingers and you say you want okra, you're in trouble. My own wife, Grace, when we go shopping in Safeway, you see some nice mangoes. You tell the man or the woman how the mango is going. And what is the answer? In plastic bags, sir. You know, this is what makes our language so rich. You get a Guyanese woman who comes to England, goes to English doctor and says, doctor, I got operation. He examines her belly and says, I see no surgical sign. You know, my mother goes into Boots the chemist and she wants to buy sweet soap. So these expressions which we take for granted in Guyana, it just goes to show you that wonderful rich word which Yango of course has in his book, pork knockers. I went once to school and was discussing the pork knockers. The children were laughing. Well, you know, as we say in the Caribbean, you play fool to catch wise. I know the meaning of knockers in England, but the teachers were thinking I ignorant. I now land up and I don't know the meaning of knockers. So I play stupid, I look blank, and a teacher said, Mr. Regard, I must tell you why these children are laughing, just for your benefit. Knockers means mammary glands. She told me the meaning in correct English. So I'm trying to show you where similar words from our Creole heritage used in England create a whole new meaning. I can give you a little wordless example. By the way, Yango has wordless as peculiar to Guyanese. He has lawless as peculiar to Guyanese. He has stupidness as peculiar to Guyanese. The one thing he forgot was communist. Now, I'll tell you something. When people speak about the Caribbean not having their own language, I will tell them, you know, our language, we can write it in the most grammatically and phonetically correct spelling, but if I wrote on a white page, you're doing communist under the bottom house, you got problems. Because language is related to environment. And in the case of England, when I speak to children and use the word bottom house, it just goes to show you that because their houses aren't built on stilts, that whole bottom house culture is different. When we say in Guyana, you're looking out, it's a whole cultural ambience, a whole cultural thing. You're opening your window, you're looking out. In England in the cold, you don't open out your windows, your jealousy window, your window with a push stick and so on. It's a different setting. So language is very, very much related to environment. And if you say something like, some people, as Yango has it, like cow dung, them hard at top, them soft at bottom. If you have never lived in the country, I've got no idea of cow dung, again you're alienated from the concept and the whole metaphoric implications of those things. Now, you take something like even an English proverb, a stitch in time saves 9. Nowadays, people when a shirt get old, they chuck it out or give it a jumble sale. The whole concept of stitching, in order to, the little sewing together to save something, is no longer in vogue. So I think for English children, a proverb like like a stitch in time saves 9 is lost completely. So all of these things relating to our environment are very, very important, the way the language is connected, and Yango has that in his book. What I like about this book, and I think is very, very important for Guyanese, Caribbean people, and anyone interested in language on the whole, he highlights the various contributions, like the Amerindian, you know, you've got things like Warishi, for example, hammock, the East Indian, right, kagaz. I was in Bombay this beginning of this year, and lots of young East Indian students I spoke at university were amazed that we in Guyana, as part of our day-to-day speech, whether you're black, Portuguese, or Chinese, you might meet a guy and say, man, I'm going to the embassy, you know, you gotta have me kagaz. You gotta pass your O-level. If you ain't got kagaz, you ain't there no way. You wanna go to the movies, you ain't got money, paisa na ba. So again, the East Indian contribution, Portuguese, my mother would know that scene, Bol de Mel, and so on. That black kind of cake at Christmas time. And of course the Chinese, chow mein and lo mein, right? Don't forget the wealth of African connections, kokabe and nyam. And what teachers in this country came to realize was how the West African syntax, like I said, influenced the English vocabulary. All those things Yango got in that book, the kotai, the sock teeth, the foot bottom, the nose hole. African connections. And to show you that generosity of Guyanese spirit, it has often struck me that, for example, the way in his book he would mention, we say, as long as you eat labo and drink creek water, you've got to come back to Guyana. He makes that connection, that cross-reference to Trinidad. Once you eat the cascadura fish, you go return to Trinidad. And I, as a Guyanese person living in England now, right, become much more aware of my Caribbean connections. That's one positive thing of England. People forget that. They tend to highlight the negative. But if I had been living all my life in Guyana, I wouldn't think of writing a poem about a man called Duppy Dan. We say Jumbi. But living in England, being exposed to Jamaicans, exposed to Trinidadians, I feel my language is not simply Guyanese, my language is Caribbean. If I want to say Duppy Dan, Duppy is part of my culture. Latin America is part of my culture. The world, I'll come into that soon. Soul case. He speaks of soul case and makes the connection to the Anglo-Saxon. You're working out your soul case. A woman once said to me, an English teacher, and I found it very interesting. She said, you know, when you read poetry, your rhythms remind me of Anglo-Saxon. Now, this was an amazing sort of analogy. Your poetry has an Anglo-Saxon quality. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you know, for example, I love language. I studied the Anglo-Saxon. If you want to describe a sea is called a whale road. Oh, powerful, beautiful metaphor, beautiful poetry, a whale road. And we in the Guyana and the Caribbean talking about your soul case. And this is an interesting dimension of that book. Yango, for example, links up soul case to the Anglo-Saxon bone house. Your body is described as a bone house. When we say you lost your sweat, he links that up to Shakespeare in Midsummer Night's Dream. Man, I kill myself with laugh. He links it up to Calchas, the Homeric soothsayer, being told that he was going to die, you know, without having tasted the grapes of his own harvest. And on the very day when he felt the prophecy wasn't fulfilled, he laughs and laughs in front of the old beggar and dies. I believe seriously when they spoke of the Renaissance man, when they spoke of the Renaissance woman, they were speaking futuristically. They had in mind the Caribbean man and woman. Because we are a people of eclectic connections, a whole universal dimension. You read Yango's book, you have Greek mythology, Celtic mythology, Norse mythology, Latin, French. That is the kind of people we are. How can I miss out on the man and woman relationship? You making fun? What's wrong with you, man? I noticed he had a word here I haven't heard in years. Your friends in. He and she friends in. Right? And then you're muching up. And the man wayward, you give him some stand-home pap. You know. And then, of course, another old-time expression, you get blow. And you're walking along the road, and you stump your foot. You're going to a party, and you stump your foot. And somebody must say, you better watch it, you're going to get blow. Right? These different connections. And it's amazing that I can make a connection to show you how every word in a poem or in literature matters. I was speaking to an Irish friend of mine recently, Matthew Sweeney, an Irish poet, and he was saying that he wrote in one of his novels, waking up at the streaks of dawn. A wonderful expression, the streaks of dawn, colorful expression, the Irish. And the editor felt, was this a misprint? Was it the break of dawn? Was it the stroke of dawn? But no, the streaks of dawn is marvelous. In Roy Heath's novel, he had a man, a character looking for wife. As you know what that means. The man was looking for sexual pleasure. He looking for wife. The editor felt, was the indefinite article omitted? And I think the editor wanted looking for a wife. And I mentioned that very simple example because it totally shows you how we are using English vocabulary, but how the connotations, the meanings are totally different, right? So very, very, very important, because in any culture, you've got what you might call the subtext. And if you saw on the printed page, a coming to come, which you're improving, you're coming along nicely, are coming to come. My God, they will feel you're writing pornography. Lovely words like pauper, you pope the fet, you pope the sport, nuff, nuff. And such wonderful imagery, I feel like a scent ice. That kind of imagery and metaphor would not have the same meaning to an English person. Coming from a hot country, when you might buy your ice, your Marby, and your milk and your Pepsi, and you know the value of a scent ice, and you watch that scent ice melting in the sun, man, you feel small, small, small. A powerful metaphor. Monkey pon iron. You see somebody cock up on a bicycle. My mother used to ride a big bicycle with a duck belly. It's also called a preggy. That powerful metaphor to describe a bicycle with that sort of rungish type of belly. So what I'm saying is these are very, very powerful metaphors, and many of them, they lose their impact in a different environment. When you say to someone, before board wife wake, or before cock crow, you say to the average child living in a housing estate in Brixton, or in Walthamstow, or in Hackney, wake up at cock crow. The whole concept of cock crow hasn't got the same power, the same symbolism. Now these things are all there, and some things are becoming lost when you live in cities. I've been trying to give a very, very rough, quick idea. Look at this wonderful expression, your weekday clothes. The whole concept of weekday clothes as opposed to Sunday best. If you say, you like to talk so much, somebody wipe your mouth with a plate cloth. You know, in England you don't have a plate cloth. You might have a dish rag. But you don't have a plate cloth. And if you said to someone, she mouth hot, this woman is a real Tantario. She's a Vairago, she's a fire ass. You know, she mouth hot. And then of course you say about a man, he hands sweet. Suppose this man can cook nice. you know, Ihan sweet. All of these echoes, we are using the English vocabulary, but the echoes are rich, rich, rich. Some, like I said, this was a book of love, a great labor of love. I was very touched to hear that Yango completed this manuscript 3 days before he died. And owing to the initiative of his daughter Sonia, again continuing this labor of love, we can see this thing in print. And the thing about this book is that obviously it isn't meant to be definitive. You'll find some things are left out. But what's good is that it jolts your memory. Like when he was speaking about sweet mouth, I flashed a sweet man and sweet woman. And all of these things is part of our culture. We can't get bashful and modest and shy and Puritan because we are missing out on a vital part of our culture. What we might consider obscene, the English one comes along, or the anthropologist, and calls it folklore. You call it obscene, he calls it folklore. It goes between printed covers. But Guyana, we have a special, like all Caribbean people, we've got a powerful connection to language, a powerful connection to word, you know, and the whole concept of speechification, man, we love it. It becomes a sort of a part of our culture that breaks into legend and memory. There was a former traffic superintendent who used to speak on the radio, and this has gone into memory. You know, he once spoke of, you know, we had so many motor cars, you are becoming more motivated. You know, and the reason why the choke and rob is so high in Guyana, a lot of the streets so dark and must be eliminated. You know? And don't forget the Indian man who was conscious of his speech, and when the little boy passed the showcase, and the little boy said, "Papa, wada?" He said, "Talk proper, don't say awada, say da awa." So, I mean, I tell you, I can go on, I can go on. Right? Like I said, we will all look at the book. You might spot a few things. Oh, this was forgotten, or that was forgotten, or this one, because, like, for example, clothing. We could look at clothing. I'd forgotten that one, a saltfish cask. A lovely expression for a top hat. And then Yango speaks of the bug house, which is a part of the old cork hat. And something I used to say as a worthless little boy, a man's jock strap was a monkey hammock. I mean, these are all part of our culture. And I want to compliment Yango for persevering. It's a labor of love. This man wasn't a linguist approaching it academically, yet here was a mind that could make classical connections, could make all manner of connections, and fill in and fill out our minds. And some people living away from Guyana might look at a mango and think, I'm feeling nostalgic. I don't know if anything wrong with me, but a mango don't make me feel nostalgic. They go to Brixton Market and they see guinep, and they say, I ain't tasted guinep for a long time. That don't get me nostalgic, because them guinep in Brixton travel far and wide. And they look what we call frucken. Them is frucken guinep. Or they might hear a record, and the record takes their mind right back to the 50s or the 60s. They hear a Brook Benton, and they go on the platters, and they go on all sad. I miss Guyana. For me, it is a language. I've been in situations in this country where somebody says to me, "Guess who I put up with?" And I say, "Wait, boy. I don't know when last I hear that expression, "but up." And when I hear that type of thing, I connect. This book is like a well. If you want to go back home to recharge your batteries, you're entitled to, valid. But what I'm saying is, for me, language is a powerful way of recharging your batteries. The Mexican poet Octavio Paz said, language makes life habitable. Human beings use language, but we are also a language that produces language. We should pour a drop of wine in the corner for Yango. Before I hand over to his daughter, you know, we don't get this chance often to commemorate and respect our pioneers. You know, we got a bad habit. When somebody dead, they start talking about it was a nice Guyanese and a hard-working Guyanese and was a pioneer. That's a waste of time. And when you're young and your blood hot, like back in Guyana, we might see AJ as the old brigade. But now looking back in perspective, when A.J. Seymour was writing about Maconaima in a colonial situation, that in itself was a radical act. To be able to embrace his Amerindian culture when he was surrounded by Victorian poetry. But we as young fellas couldn't appreciate that. And I want to point out in this room certain people. You know, for example, you've got Cecil Nobriger, who was writing poetry years ago. Radical educationalist. A big hand for Cecil. Yeah. And of course, those of you who watch EastEnders who might forget that Tommy Idler's a folk singer and guitarist from Guyana. He gone? With the white beard. A big hand for Tommy Idler. Right? And then you've got Keith Wade, poet of the flute. Right? And it's a great honor and privilege that Keith Wade's dad and mom are here today, going back to American tours. A big hand. All you people, what Aubrey Bryan, the man with his sweet pan hand. Yeah. Right? And don't forget his wife's side, the daughter of a radical pioneering journalist, you know, B.O. Wills. Yeah. You can't forget the big hand for B.O. I might have forgotten names, but my intentions are right. I was speaking to Eileen Rogers during the little Guyanese snacks. Don't forget, thanks to the caterer, because language feeds the mind, but if you're hungry, you can't appreciate the word. Yes, and Eileen was saying to me, I had to laugh. She was telling me, she said, you know, when I was a little girl, my mother told me, she saw a woman coming up the yard by the gate. And my mother, this is Eileen, quoting Eileen, right? Eileen Rogers. She said, my mother said to me, look two-faced Jenny coming. And when the woman come and sit down in the chair, little Eileen started to look all around. And then this woman said, girl, what you looking at? She said, my mother said, you got two faces. Man, I tell you. See, my mother is here as well. She comes from the Buldamel people, the Portuguese. All of my little girls born here and growing up here, like I said, I feel proud as a Guyana man, proud that we have got so many streams to feed our soul, man. We have a right to Europe, a right to Africa, a right to India, a right to China. We are cosmic beings. Then we got the hinterland to back me up. So I want to introduce Cecil Nobriger to do a poem for us. Before Yango's daughter, Cecil can do a poem. I think Grace, if she's in the mood, will do a poem. And I might even hit you one.
Coming after a speaker like that, who is very versed in what he was saying about Yango's book, the only thing I could think of quickly is a poem, because he spoke of choke and rob or something, and years and years ago I wrote a poem called I Pine. Don't think I cry because one day you'll die, for I believe in life, there's death for life again. And they deceive themselves who claim that parted ones ne'er come again. Death's another word for change. And change and challenge, partners true, create excitement in my view. Why should I cry? Don't think I cry because that servant maid